I think we should be live any second. Hmm. So we are live. Uh, okay. Thank you everyone for joining today's session on Naukri Learning. In today's webinar, we'll take a look at the science of retention in marketing. So while customer acquisition has its own place in business growth, retention is equally and at times more important in the long run. So in today's session, we'll be talking about why retention in marketing, how to correctly measure it, what are the common mistakes that companies make, and a lot more. And as a speaker for today's session, we have Palak Wadhawan. She's currently growth manager at Inmobi and has worked extensively into CRM, retention, growth strategy, user lifecycle management, as well as user engagement. And okay, so you all know that there's a chat box where you would be able to type in your questions about the session, about the topic, and so that we can all address it at the end of the session. So request you to post in questions so that you can have them answered during the course of the session. Also, if you like the session, please don't forget to share it with your friends or with your social network if somebody can benefit from this content. So without any further delay, let's get started. Palak, over to you.
Thanks, Neharika. Thanks for the lovely introduction. I hope everyone is doing well, right, in the COVID times. Without any further delay, I'll start with the topic. So the topic talks about the science of retention, how retention is important, why is it important, why have we been ignoring retention, why has most of the company been ignoring retention, and this will be a step-to-step guide on how can you actually look into retention, look into the problems that you have over here, and then solve it by step-by-step process. Okay, so just a moment. Yeah. So when we talk about growth, the first thing that comes to the mind in the company that we talk about is acquisition. We talk about revenue. We talk about engagement. But the one thing that we forget to talk about is retention, or something that we do not hear a lot about is retention. This is the most under-talked topic when it comes to growth and revenue, revenue increment in a company. But why is this? This is because mostly it is because of the two reasons that I can see. One, that retention is a very tough nut to crack, right? It's not easy to get retention. The experimentation that comes into retention takes a lot of time to get implemented, and the result takes a lot of time. So usually companies find it easier to get growth by getting more, by increasing people on the top of the funnel. Second, over here is because of the lack of understanding. Retention, as we know, with all the definitions that we have, we understand retention by people who are coming on the platform. All of these we understand, but the core of the definition of it, what exactly should we measure, which users retention are we going to measure, all of these basic details is something that we miss. Hence we look into a wrong retention metric and try to solve a wrong metric, try to solve the wrong problem statement, because of which your retention does not increase, your efforts goes into waste, and hence you feel that it's come to a dead end and there's no improvement in any metric. Hence you again resolve back to acquisition or more engagement in order to get sustained growth, right? So before talking about retention length, let's just define what is retention. So retention is nothing but it's a measure of how many users return to your product over time, right? So this is the simplest definition that I could find. That is how many people who were once acquired on your system at one point of time, and how frequently are they coming to your platform over time, right? But as I've also discussed that this is very important, let's discuss this in detail, that why is retention important, right? As I said, that acquisition is also important, engagement is also important, yes, but retention always leads. It's the king of growth that we have seen. You might have seen a lot of people also talking about this, that retention is the king of growth. But why is it? We'll learn in the upcoming slides. So without retention, there's no true growth. Retention is one metric. If you improve retention in a funnel, you actually improve all the other metrics of the funnel, be that acquisition, be that monetization, be that virality, be that revenue, be that upgrade rates or lifetime value. I'll give you certain examples over here. So if you increase, the longer the user retain on the platform, uh, the better it is for you. For example, if you're an ad-based company or a subscription-based company, the longer the user retain on a platform, the more you can show them ads, the more chances you get to actually convert them for your subscription. Hence, your LTV increases, and better the LTV increases, the more sooner you get your money back. You can put it in other marketing efforts. The more people who are, the longer they retain on your platform, the more they talk about your platform, the more they share it with other people, and you get, your product not only gets viral, but you also get new user who acquire acquisition at a lower cost. That way you get technically new user for free, right? If you have more people talking about your app, they recommend your app to other people and they download it. The more longer the people are retaining on your platform, your revenue also increases, be that an online e-commerce or any other subscription or ad based or anything. The more longer you retain, the more chances you get to nurture these users, and the higher revenue that you make out of them. Now, if you are a subscription based thing, if you are a freemium based product, if they retain the freemium duration of your product, you get a chance to convert more and more people by nudging them and telling them, because they've engaged to your product, you get more chances to nudge them and convert them into your subscribed base. So hence it actually not only increases your down of the funnel, just the revenue, but it's also increasing your acquisition, your LTV, and everything that's mentioned over here. Right, as Brian Balfour, he's correctly mentioned this thing, that the point is every improvement that you make to retention also improve all the things: virality, LTV, payback period. It is literally the foundation of all growth, and that's really why retention is sticking. Okay, now we've talked about retention, that important, it's going to improve all the other metric in your funnel. But how do I improve retention? Now, this is the black box where people don't understand. We've heard so many articles on it, but how is the step-to-step process, and what do I do with my product in order to increase retention? This is a big question mark, and people don't know how to pursue it, right? So the entire this thing is actually a playbook where I'll tell you, I'll try to cover as much as possible the steps, step-by-step process, and how you can increase retention over time, or at least understand the user and then frame strategies for it. Okay. Now, before measuring retention, there are two very important questions that people do not see. People don't know, usually have a fault in defining retention, because how they see retention currently is new users who are coming to your platform, and they just measure it over daily or weekly retention, right? But this is not how we should be measuring retention. We cannot treat all the users as equal. There might be some users who just came to your app accidentally, or who just downloaded it and then uninstalled it right at the moment, did not enjoy your app. So we should not be considering that user same as our core power users, who can be our core power users, right? So before measuring retention, the two questions that we should be answering would be the critical key event and the usage interval, right? So what is, according to your product, what is the key event that you want your user to take? What is which aligns with your value proposition? This can be seen through data, that what is the first step that user are taking the most, and which is actually in the first few sessions, right? From your product flow or your CRM flow, you will see what is the first thing that you are doing, which actually says that, okay, now the user has gotten the value out of this product, right? Second thing is a usage interval that can be daily, weekly, and monthly. First thing is very easy. I won't explain it much. Usage interval over here is very important. Now, I've seen this in a lot of companies, that when you measure retention, even for example, I'll give an example of e-commerce industry, right? Now, e-commerce industry would be measuring, you won't be shopping, let's take Myntra for an example. You won't be shopping every day on a Myntra platform, right? You won't be or any grocery buying, you won't be doing it every day. You might be a weekly customer, it might be a fortnightly thing, or maybe a monthly thing, right? But over here, in e-commerce company, a lot of people see retention on a daily basis. So when you start seeing retention of the users who are coming back on your platform on a daily basis, you actually see a very wrong picture, right, of your platform. Now that is not there. So how you need to actually understand and compare that what your ideal frequency of usage of your user should be. That can be different for different platforms. For example, an education platform, people will come every day to learn online, that has to be daily. Maybe OTT platform or something, people will come over there daily to consume the content, right? YouTube, people might come daily. But if you have something like food apps, delivery apps, or traveling app, or e-commerce app, that can have a weekly or monthly usage. You have to keep that to see the real picture of your retention. Now, when you map these things in the retention curve, right now we have a lot of tools, marketing automation tools, which can easily give you this graph, right? You just have to put your core metric and you have to put the usage interval, time duration, and you get it, this graph. So this is how a retention curve looks like, right? And once you get this thing, retention curve for your company, the first thing that you should be looking at is how does a retention curve looks for your company, right? If for your product, if it looks something like product A, then it's good. You should actually optimize your retention efforts. You have found your product market fit, right? That means the product that you're promoting to the market, they understand your product and they want to use it for a longer time. It can be very near to the zero, baseline zero, right? Which is also fine. But if it flattens, it's fine that you have found your product market fit. And now the next thing that you can do is solving for retention optimization. Whereas, and this is for a lot of company that I've seen, if your product retention curve looks somewhat like product B, then you do not have product market fit. That means out of any given point in time, if you have acquired 100% of your users at after n number of days, that can also be after a year, you end up churning all the users. Therefore, you are just burning your money. And at that point, you shouldn't be asking about what retention strategy should I optimize to improve my number. Rather, you should see whether you have your product market fit or not, and try to optimize and improve that first, and then come to retention strategies. Right. So another questions, assuming that you have a product market fit, your line is moving flat, is going flat, it's not moving to zero. In this case, the next question comes that, okay, fine, this is there. Now, how do I influence these retention curves? Very important. This is where the strategy comes into place, right? Now, in retention, at any given point in time, your active user, your daily active user, now whatever is the time duration that we've mentioned, right? Daily, weekly, or monthly. If you plot your active users, this is how your bar graph would look like, okay? Now, once you see this active user who also make a part of your retention curve, right? The problem in looking in this kind of bar graph is that it lumps together a lot of different type of active users, right? Now, over here, if you see in the graph, you see that over the several weeks, my user base is increasing over time, right? So this actually shows a good growth for me. I would be happy that, okay, my user base is growing, hence my retention is also increasing. Therefore, my active user base is improving. But if you see it like this, you will never be able to identify the user base, identify the cohort or the problem statement in your over there, and you won't be able to solve it. So the best way to do it is not to see it in this way, but to actually segregate it on users on the different life cycle they are in. So at any given point in time, your active user consists of your new users, your current users, your resurrected users, and your churn and churn user is not a part of it. Your new user, current user, and your resurrected users, right? Churned users are the one who are not active with you in the current time frame and were not active in the previous time frame. New user, I'll just give one line description on this. New users are one who just installed your app or just came for the first time in the current time frame. Current users would be the one who've been active with you in the current time frame and the previous time frame as well. Resurrected would be the ones who were active with you, who are active with you in the current time frame that you take, but were not active with you in the previous time frame. It is very important. This is also one thing. It's very important not to just assume what the definition is going to be, but according to your product, you should have a very finite, set, proper definition of it, because any changes in the definition will change your strategy, will change will change the entire strategy that you promote, and hence your outcome may vary, or your outcome will not give you the result that you want it to be. There'll be no increase in retention, or even for that say engagement, right? So once you've defined all of this properly, you can map this, right? You can map this in the bar chart, the similar bar chart. So this is the similar bar chart that I was showing you earlier, the active user base. But now that I've segregated according to the life cycle in which the cohort is, it gives me the true picture of my product, right? Over here, as you can see, the real reason that my product was growing is not because my retention efforts were working for me, but because my top of the funnel was increasing, right? And because my top of the funnel was increasing, more and more users that I was, you can see the green, the dark green one, it's increasing over the weeks of use. Hence, I see that there's a true growth, right? And if I would have seen the previous one, I wouldn't have made any marketing efforts over here. In fact, if you see the churned user, the one which is in red, that is increasing over weeks of use. That is that I am doing something wrong. The product is doing something wrong, that all the users, most of the users who are coming on my platform are getting churned, right? And over here, the one part which you should be focusing on in increasing. So let's say this is definitely a product which doesn't have the right retention over here. The retention is bad for this product, but assuming that the retention would be good for a product, in that case, your light green part, that is your current user, that is the bar frame which should be increasing over time, which should be increasing over weeks. If that part is increasing, that shows that you actually your retention efforts are working for you, and yes, you have good retention over time, right? Now once you see the true picture of it, now you exactly know where to target so that you can have bigger result. One important thing while we try to solve retention is we just hear the terms like, okay, let's just improve the onboarding journey, or let's just get more and more resurrected users over here. These are the terms that we hear. This is something that comes from our top management, and we start working on it, right? But for each and every product, your problem statement can be very different. And by looking at this graph, you exactly know where to target, which is a larger, bigger cohort where you will be targeting to get a better result, right? Because retention effort takes a lot of time, and if you invest your energy on something which is on a user base which is very small, even if there is a good change, it's not going to create any impact on your growth, right? So it's waste of effort over here. For example, in this, what we can see is your new user is something which is growing, and because this comprises of the larger part of your cohort, this is somewhere that you should be focusing on. Another part that you should be focusing on over here is your churned user, and this is also increasing. Either you should find a way to know that whenever a tipping point where you know that the user is about to churn, right? And this is somewhere that you should put your CRM CRM strategies, or maybe other product initiatives, so that you can just lure the user into engaging with you. Or you should find better strategies, maybe gamification or any such thing, growth loops for that matter, we'll talk in the later slides, to get the churn back into your active user funnel, right? So important point to note over here is your light green bar should be increasing over time. Now, so once you know this thing, how do you solve for it? Like, what is the next step that you do? So for any part of the curve or the bar, there are only three things: whether you're solving for onboarding, whether you're solving for the longer term retention or dominant user. These are the three steps that you're going to do for each and every cohort. One is segmenting a lot, like segment as much as you can. And this is what marketing is all about, right? We just try to segment more and more, more and more, and get more and more details, and then try to solve it. Another thing is quantitative indicators. What are quantitative indicators are? These are the data that you get, like I told you, like we have the tools like More Engage and Clever tab. We can go over there and we can just see the funnel that, okay, after install, what did the user do? After what was the tipping point just before uninstall? Just see all the behavior of the user and see which event is causing the user to stop using it, or which event is causing the user to retain, right? So you have to see a lot more data. It's very easy. You just open bunch of users in a cohort, go to their life cycle, see each and every step what they are doing. Even if you evaluate like 10-20 users, you get a very good brief sense of what they are doing, and hence you can direct your hypothesis on it. So based on segmentation and your quantitative indicators, you come up with a set of hypotheses that, okay, maybe this is the reason that either my users are churning, or this is the reason my users are retaining. And to that hypothesis, you will have to validate those hypotheses with qualitative data. Now, what is qualitative data? As much as we love data, we work on data, but it's very important to listen to your users, talk to your users. That can be through surveys, that can be through one-to-one call, that can be through emailers. A lot of channels out there where you can actually contact your user. You can have this group, you can talk to them and understand why did they stop using. Just divide them into different cohorts, understand why did they stop using, and or why is the reason, what do they love about the product, right? One small thing that you have to note while doing any kind of survey is not to ask them direct questions in terms of how much would you rate the product, or how likely are you to do this, that thing. Because what happens is your answer gets skewed because they just try to answer whatever is there in the option. So the better way is to ask somewhat like, what made you use a product, what is the problem statement that you were trying to solve from the product. And instead of giving them options, just try to listen, just give them a blank space, and just so that they can fill it up, so that you understand why exactly is the reason that they're doing this. Actually helps you to shape the product and also your CRM strategies according to it. So once you are done with this, you have this hypothesis, you experiment it, you do a lot of experimentation, you try it on your product, and once that is done, you will understand what after a certain period of time, you understand if it's working or not. If it's not working, you go back to segmentation again, do the quantitative indicators, send survey, validate it, and put it as a part of your strategy, right? Coming to segmentation, how do you segment the users, right? And what is the basic, like how do you segment it? So currently, how I would also start if I'm solving a retention strategy would be, I'll start with the user source. Acquisition source is one thing, or city for that matter. What technology are they using? What device are they using? What OS are they from, right? What is the entry path? That is, if they were acquired from, let's say, ad or organically, or any partnership, any affiliate, any way that they've come from, and you see what is the retention in all of these kind of users. So broadly, one thing that's very important before you start this entire thing is that your instrumentation should be in place. Whenever your once your instrumentation is in place, you have a set of user behavior, user properties. User behavior are the actions that your users are taking, important actions that your users are taking, and properties becomes these things like your source, your technology, your OS, your first seen date, example, and all of these things, right? So once you have all of these data, I would recommend you to actually first take all the user properties and whatever you feel are the important user properties, is segregate your retention curve according, splitting it according to your user property, one, and then you do it according to actions. Both are equally important to do, because that will give you more quantitative indicators on why did one thing work and why did another thing did not work. I'll give you an example. So in this cohort, what is done is, if you see the first graph, this is based on the behavior one, the user behavior that I was talking about. Now, based on 3 action, this is for music app, right? So these are 3 actions that we've actually seen the retention for these. One is who started the free trial, one is who did not start the free trial, one is played at least 3 songs. And these 3 is something that you have to take it from your hunch, or you have to see your core metric, value metric, and then form important behavior events, and then segregate it and see what is the retention difference. Now, once you see this thing, you understand that people who have done start free trial, you do not need to do a lot of things to improve their retention, because as you can see, the retention is already high, better than others. But the 2 parts where you actually need to focus on is people who did not do free trial, or people who've at least played 3 songs, right? So this is the cohort that you want to work more upon. Now, once you have this data, how you do it is, once you know people who have done free trial, right? And you've also established personas over here. If not even established personas, you do not have to think a lot about it. You just see free trial, go to the users who've done it in the first few sessions, just see the activities they have done, in how much time have they done it, and what all activities led them to it, right? And you will have to try to mold the other 2 segments, the behavior of other 2 cohorts, in a similar way. One thing to note is, there are some kind of people who actually really wants to use your app, and they'll do whatever to discover the core metrics and do the core events, the power events that you have, right? And they might do it sooner. But if the other cohorts are not doing it sooner, you do not have to be discouraged about it. It might take longer, but you will have to handhold them so that they can go from one step to another. Might take a little bit longer, but you do not have to stop your efforts in it, right? So this is how you do it for behavior. Similarly, over here that I can see web, Android, and iOS device based on their platform. Now you know that if you see the difference, the web has really good retention, right? So if you do any effort on web, it just it's not going to be there's not going to be huge increment. Let's put it this way: it's not going to be huge increment, but you know exactly what to do. In Android and iOS, you can have some quantitative data, talk to these users. Over here, the qualitative data also comes into play. Talk to these users, and what is it that actually help them in having a seamless product experience. Try to replicate it for your Android and iOS as well, and see if those product changes or your CRM efforts in that case helps in growing retention or not, right? One important point over here to notice is, whatever changes you make, you are not going to get a result overnight. You're not going to get it even in a week. It takes a lot of more time. It might take a month, might take 2 months. For some companies, it might take an entire year for you to have a very huge increment. But the point is, you will always see slight indicators, slight numbers which are growing up. And once that is there, it motivates you, and you should keep going and not stop your experiment halfway. This is very important. Experimentation should not stop halfway. Okay. So as I've already discussed this also, and this is the part of the segmentation and quantitative thing over here, that with the help of segmentation and quantitative data, you put some hypothesis. With that hypothesis, you run a lot of experiments. Experiments has to be 2-way. One has to be a product experience. If you find that it's difficult for your user to go from one screen to another, or they're unable to understand what the product is about, in that case you have to run experiments on the product. But if you find difficulty in just bringing people on the application, in that case CRM and your channels like push notification, SMS, WhatsApp, email, web push, these come into play to get more user and hand holding them to another steps, right? So it has to be a combination of both, right? You have to run a lot more experiments, and whatever you get the result of the experiment, whatever you get, you have to validate that from your survey. and see, implement it. If it works, if it doesn't, do the entire step again. So it goes into a loop. And yeah, you might get a lot of experiments which fail, but the best thing to note over here is not take it, not be discouraged by it, but actually take it as a learning. Okay, these are the things which are not working for your users, and understand your persona better, which is the main intent of any marketer, right? So some of the strategies that I would list over here is that's been working, that I have seen, I've implemented, my peers have implemented, or I have read the case studies of people. Few strategies in the initial step that helps is educating users, right? We fail to educate users, and we feel that because we are the product owners and we have used our product, initially we might have asked our peers on how to use a product, and we feel that the user who's using it will also understand it in the same way that we understand it. This is not the case, right? You have to educate your users, and education doesn't have to be on the first day of your product. This is very important. You have to educate it even if it's after 100 days. If you find that the user is facing some problem after 100 days, not going from one screen to another, it's then that you have to educate your users. How do you find that the user is not moving over here? So for all the users that I was talking about, right, for new user, or your active current user, or your dormant user, right, you can create a funnel for them. For example, in new user, you can do who did install, who did sign up, and then who did your first event. That can be, let's say, play for an e-commerce, that can be placing your items on your cart and then buying, right? And or maybe entering your cart details and then maybe buying, right? You have to see in which stage of the funnel is the maximum drop off. There, you know that this is the maximum opportunity space, and you know that this is where the users not able to understand. This is where you start educating users, or at least handhold the users to the stage. Hand holding users is another very important thing that we're not doing. That is that when we go into a product, we do not find the product in a way where one screen is leading me to another screen, from one engagement to another engagement, right? One important thing that you try, which is an indicator also of good retention and engagement, is how long your session length is, right? The longer it is, the more people find value. The more people find value, they're going to retain longer, and hence more revenue and everything, right? So hand holding users from one stage to another is very important. If it's very difficult to implement it on the product, it takes you have to roll out, you have to get the release and everything. In-apps are a good way of using it, where you can just show an in-app once an activity is done and just move them to another part of the screen. This helps in because the user do not want to think, they just want you to tell them what to do, and this is the best option. You can just tell them what to do at each and every stage. Onboarding screens. Initially, there are few companies who like doing onboarding screen. They tell you this is an overlay that you find on your screen, which says, okay, this is where you find this is where you find this, etc. Right? One problem that I find it is that we try and give each and every information in the first go, and the user doesn't have that much of time to spare, or at least understand. They just want to use a product. They're like, okay, I don't want to know this. I just want to use a product. I'll figure it out, right? But the thing is, you will have to not do it in the first initial stage, but you have to maybe do it over a period of time, right? In, let's say, 7 days, or whatever your onboarding journey is, however long it is, right? You have to segregate it over a period of time, and then show them whenever either they are stuck, or just have this logic that people who have not done this, next time they open the app, I show them this particular overlay. You might have to use that intelligence over here in order to get it right. So this is how you should have your onboarding screen. Very important to tell the user what to do next. Activity notifications. Now a lot of notifications is one thing. The entire CRM campaigns is one thing which brings a lot of impact to your people. This is one reason where your retention, very powerful medium which can increase your retention, because you are getting more and more users and nudging more and more users to come on a platform and do the activity, right? I'll divide it into two. So one is your mass campaigns that you're sending it to the entire user base, and some are activity-based notifications, right? These activity-based notifications is reaching out to less number of users, but it reaches out to your exact stage of the user, and you can actually have very impactful personalized messaging, and you can get the user to move from one stage to another very quickly. And this stage is power user, casual user, about to be dominant user. These stages of the life cycle that you have, let's say you see that a user is about to die, you can have something real time trigger to get them to another thing. And if you know that for a casual user, it just needs like 2 activities to make that person, or 2 app visit to make that person a power user, your activity notification is very personalized, it is very relevant, hence the impact is very high. So it helps in moving the user from one cohort to another very quickly. So you should focus on having many activity notifications as possible and reduce the mass notification as much as you can. Okay. Another thing is gamification. Nowadays, a lot of people are using gamification, and this entire logic of gamification came obviously from the video games that we play, right? So a human mind, the psychology says that our human mind, we actually get very motivated when it comes to when we see our progress, when we see some competition, we see some reward winning, all of these factors which comes into play, that really motivates us, right? So what in your platform, and now actually people have found a way to hook it in any kind of platform, right? Just come, you do something, you earn some points, and that points has some reward, right? So this is actually that you are doing some progress in a day. So you can add some gamification, tell them that whenever you come to an app, you're doing something or winning something that doesn't has to be a tangible thing, but it can be something within an app also. You're doing something that actually helps, getting the user back on the platform again and again. And they get hooked to it. They get more motivated to use your product, right? So that actually comes from within. The motivation for using a product comes because they're seeing some progression happen, some the progress happening on the application. Another is growth loop. So growth loop is another very new thing. It's also called as flywheels, I guess, which is the next big thing that's going to happen in marketing, which is going to make your retention strategies even better, helping to get more users. I won't go in depth in this. I'll just give you one example that is of LinkedIn, right? So how LinkedIn does it is, you might have seen if you have a profile on LinkedIn. So whenever someone views your profile, you get a notification and you just click on it. You come back to LinkedIn, you go back to that user's profile, view it. And while you're viewing it, you also see 2 or 3 other profiles, right? As soon as you see their profile, they get a notification, and then the loop continues. They come on the platform, they see others' profile, they come on the platform. So as you see, there's a loop that's happening where your user, a very small chunk of user, an activity that they did actually initialize a very huge loop, right? And which is actually covering a larger and larger base, right? So this is a very nice technique that you can use if your product has any sort of thing which is connects something the way LinkedIn has, right? You should use it. Don't wait for anything, but you should use it, find strategies and do it. This actually is going to be something break or maker. I think this is something that'll make your retention go high immediately. Okay. Now coming to another part, that is at every stage when you're trying to improve retention, before starting to measure retention, while doing all the experiments, and then later on, one thing consistently that you should be measuring at each and every point is the pulse on the growth. Okay. So the formula is given over here, that is the number of new users plus the resurrected users divided by dormant users. Now your current users, we've also spoken, right? The current user is the ones who actually becomes a major part of your retention curve, and the ones who if you're increasing that cohort, then new users and resurrected users are the only 2 cohorts which actually increases this substantially, right? and then your dormancy. So this has more focused. So over here, the more focus that you have to put is on the dormant user. So if this ratio is greater than 1, that means if you have less churn and maybe have the same number of new users and resurrected coming, but if you have less churn, then your pulse ratio is greater than 1. That means your efforts are working, your experimentation is working, and you are moving towards better retention numbers, true growth, right? But in case your pulse rate is lesser than 1, or whatever the ratio it is even gone worse than it, in that case, that means that you're losing more users than you have before, and you have to think of ways to reduce the dormancy. Over here, the only variable that you can focus on, or you should be focusing on, should be the dormant user. How to uh, uh, find ways to reduce the churn of the users, right? Lastly, some common mistakes. I've also spoken about all these common mistakes in the slide. I'll just repeat once. One is ignoring retention, right? We see that people feel that if you want to get more growth, if you want to, because what companies want is they want to grow from X to 10X. They want to grow the MAU from 1 million to 10 million, something like this, right? And the only way that they can think is, I'll put more and more money in acquisition, and the more money I make in acquisition, within time I'm going to make more MAU in the later months to come, right? But one thing, as you can see in company A and company B, you can see the company A, after 3 years itself, also, like, it took a lot of years obviously, but just because of a better retention numbers, the MAU of company A is way higher than company B, despite having larger number of people coming from the top of the funnel, right? So this is the power of retention. So you might ignore it for the a longer time, but you can't ignore it for the longest, right? At this one point that you have to start thinking about retention, because this is the one which is actually going to get more growth. And you, at one point, you will have to think about spending less money of acquisition and retaining more, so that the company can grow and you can get more revenue, right? Another thing is incorrectly defining retention. So when we talk about retention, one part of it that we've discussed is not understanding what the core metric it is and what the daily usage is. Another thing is also, when we talk about retention, people just think about, okay, whoever are engaged in the platform, engagement badha do, right? Engagement, just try and increase the engagement. Engagement is equal to retention, but this is not the case. So retention is something which actually is to do with getting both the depth as well as the width of it, right? You have to get more and more users, and you have to cater to each and every stage of the users. Just not when the users become a current user you start catering to them, but you have to actually start it from the new user, from activation to resurrection to engagement, and each and everything has to be specifically viewed, and different strategies have to be opted in it, right? So retention is not equal to engagement. In fact, retention equal to all of these things, and you should be looking at either one of this when you're trying to do the strategies, because retention is an output metric, and if you start chasing the output metric, you don't get any actionables. But if you know that, okay, activation is going low or engagement is going low, you have actionables, and you can work upon it to increase that number. Another thing is choosing the wrong unit of measurement. A lot of times it happens is, especially in, I think, subscription business, we see that, okay, we want more retention. We actually measure the retention by revenue, and if the revenue is not matching up, we start looking at the user retention, right? So we're looking at revenue growth over time, and if that doesn't match, comes back to usage retention. But we have to understand that revenue retention and user retention are two different things, and that also depends on your company structure, how your company business model is, and according to that you will have to make a decision that whether you have to look into revenue retention, or you have to look after user retention, right? Retention, most probably in most of the companies also says it's more about user retention, because the more user come, the more you're going to use, the more they're going to use, the more retention is come. So actually retention becomes a output of it, right, of this thing. So this is where people mix and match these things. It's also written over here that retention is reflected in the breadth and depth of the product usage. And the more that usage comes, then revenue, which is the output of the usage of the product, right? So when you look into retention, I think user retention is something that you should be focusing on first, and revenue becomes the output of it, right? Ending this. Any questions, guys?
We are like we've already exceeded the time limit. Let's quickly wind up the questions that have come live. So one question is how to distinguish between new and resurrected users.
How to distinguish between new and resurrected users? Yeah, it's very simple. New users, as I was talking about the time frame, right? For example, if your users are coming weekly, right? People who have done install or have done first open of your application or web app in that time frame, in that week, these are your new users. And resurrected are the ones who have who are currently here in, let's say, week 7 to 14 they were here, but in week 1 to 6, 0 to 6 they weren't here, right? In the previous week they weren't here, but they are here in your current week. These are your resurrected users. So that's why that time interval is important to define these kind of users. Yeah.
Okay. And who will we call current users and new users?
Current
Please continue.
So current users would be the one who were active in your current time frame as well as your previous time frame. So if you put a segment, would be people who did this activity in this current week, who did app open or your core activity, let's say by now, right? In this current week and the previous week, that becomes your current users.
Okay. There's another question that has just come in. What is the difference between activation and engagement?
Activation is when the user come on the platform. That can be new user, that can be user who's been new for a longer period of time. The core activity that you have, that can be listening to a song, or I think for example Netflix, it can be starting any content, right? YouTube, watching a video. So whatever the core metric is, unless and until the user doesn't do it, the user is not considered as activated, right? So if the users come on the platform, they've not done a core activity. In order to get the user to do core activity, that's activation. And once they have done your activation, in order to get them to do that activity again and again and help them to form a habit, that comes under engagement. So first, activation is a problem you should be solving, and then you should be taking all the activation users and try to create habit for them in order for them to engage.
Okay, we don't have any more live questions. If anybody wants to ask, they still have a chance. I'll just, since, in the interest of time, I'll just take one or two interesting questions that we got at the time that, people registered for the webinar. So one is like, how should one use customer retention when a customer has like a lot of choices and there's a lot of competition in the market?
Right. So users, okay, so the one thing that you guys have to notice is you'll always have more and more competitions coming, more and more new users who follow the same business model that you have, right? But in order for user, if the user has come to your platform, installed your app, or maybe come to your platform, you have actually achieved the bigger battle in itself, and then you will have to find hooks to actually engage that user more and more, right? And not worry about, if I have competition, what if they go to the competition? Because even you see yourself, if you install an app or go to a platform, if you enjoy their services, do not find any problem in their services, you really do not have the time or energy to even explore other apps, right? Because that's not giving you any added incentive, right? So the best way is, once you have gotten them on the platform, the best is to have improve your user experience as much as possible. Try to reduce churn as much as possible, so that you do not do anything so that the user leaves and goes to another competitor apps.
Okay, one last question I'll take since we don't have time. But this was quite an interesting question, so I thought that we should cover that. How to retain customers who did not have a good experience with your product or service?
Yes. So if a user did not have a good experience in your product, The only thing that you can do over here is two things that's worked for me, right? And this has worked in my previous company, where people, the students who used to come on the platform, we did not enjoy the service. I used to understand, get again survey, talk to these users, or at least understand the major reasons why did they not like the product, right? And try and improve it. So the best thing is actually a changed behavior. The best apology is a changed behavior. Is try to change that, because unless and until you don't change that, people are not going to come back to your platform. And you have to, as soon as you do that, another thing is that you have to send the user to tell them, okay, that this service has been improved, right? Apologize for it. And one added thing, that you have to give them an added benefit, an added thing, for example, reward, that can be according to whatever the USP of your product is, whatever value product is providing, right? You have to give them an incentive in that form, and then get the users back over here. It's very difficult to get to user once you've lost them. It's very difficult because they've made certain image of your product. It's very difficult to get back. But once you tell them that we have actually listened to you, improved our product just for you, and this is our some incentive that we provide, providing as a token of apology, there's a better chance for you to get those users back.
Okay, we have just one live question that has just come. How to understand retention commonly for any industry, and how engagement after onboarding depends on retaining a user?
I'm sorry, you have to repeat that again. How to see
Okay,
commonly?
so how to understand retention commonly for any industry? Like, I mean, across industry, if there is anything common that we understand about retention, and how engagement after onboarding depends on retaining a user.
So this is actually what the entire presentation was about, right? The second part.
Okay.
But the first part, I would say, if you want to see retention commonly, what I understand is, how do you, I don't know, how do you want to see the benchmark of retention? Because uh, okay, so every company would have different definition of retention, different form of retention, and benchmark of it. So if you think that how can I see it commonly, it cannot be. But that one thing can be that, okay, let's take it in this way. For a user, if they are acquiring 100% of the user, then the best thing is if they can retain at least 45 or 50% of the users in the coming months to come, like after 90 days or 3 months or monthly, right? So this is how you can see it, I think, commonly over here. Another thing is the strategies to actually improve the retentions remains common, right? But the problem statement varies product to product. So I think there's no one way or one shoe fits all thing over here in retention. That doesn't work over here. Strategies or your playbook remains the same, but your way of addressing it will always be different. Even your benchmarking will be different, right? And that you can see in a similar web app Annie, just to get that thing. But you can't see every app in the same length. And next question was, how does activation? What was it?
How engagement after onboarding depends on retaining a user.
See, this is the next step, right? Retention is, as I said, that first is activation, then is engagement, then it is over there. Once you've activated a user, unless and until you don't get the user to come back on the platform and make a habit of doing it. For example, you're watching Netflix, right? You paid in Netflix for, let's say, a month or a year, right? Let's take a month. If you just come on, you just buy, you just come on day one, you saw one content, right? You're activated on already. But if you do not come there again and again and create a habit, and let's say you stop coming over there and I don't nudge you at the right time, seeing what your previous history is, what kind of genres you like, what timing are you coming in, and not nudging you at the right time, not bringing you on the platform on the right time, in that case I'm not creating a habit for you, and hence that retention is not going to take place, right? So it's a step by step process in the funnel. And engagement is very important, right? Which helps you get, and that habit formation is very, very, very important, because that actually is the larger cohort over here. Any changes that you make over here, it's going to have a substantial effect on your retention. I don't know if I answered it correctly.
Yeah, the question was, I think, a bit a bit tricky. But anyways, thank you so much, Palak, for coming on board and having this webinar with us.
Thank you, Neha.
Thank you, and the it was pretty insightful and very very well articulated as well. Thank you so much once again. And for everyone who has watched this session, if you liked it, then you can share it ahead, or you can subscribe to our channel also. You can subscribe to Naukri Learning channel, and we will be having more such content in future. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much, guys. Thanks, Niharika.
Okay.
Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.